welcome Su Shan, and thank you for being here today. It is such an honor to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Su Shan, congratulations. You truly are stepping into one of the most significant leadership roles in Asia. And beyond all that you have achieved, what stands out is really the journey that got you here. The decisions, the sacrifices, the challenges that have shaped you to the leader you are today. And today we're going to dive deeper into that. To also, hear from you how you have truly broken barriers and also the lessons you have learned from this incredible journey. So, Sush, before we start, maybe could you bring us back to the very beginning? You were a young intern at DBS all those years ago. And
I was.
Yeah, and if you could go back in time, if you could sit down with young Su Shan back then, younger Su Shan back then, what would you say to her, and would she have imagined this at all?
Definitely not.
Aww.
Definitely not. I was 18 or 19 years old, $20 a month intern, and my job was to carry all the heavy IPO prospectuses to the Raffles Place MRT and give them out. And I remember in those days it was really hot. And I had to stand outside the MRT right in the hot sun at sort of noon to 12 because that was when it was busy. But you start at the bottom. We all do, and it's okay.
Yeah.
I think that's what I've learned is life is cyclical and it's up and down. Generally, you want to have your life go more up than down, so your trajectory is generally on the upslope, but there will be downward curves in the upslope, and you take the downs with the ups.
Wow. And Sushi, also having the privilege of also watching you as an incredible, not just, great in your career, but you have a great family too. And, a lot of times we celebrate and we often talk about the highs of success, but we rarely talk about the price of success, what it takes to get to where you are today. Is there something in your journey that perhaps was unexpectedly more challenging that got you to where you are too?
So there were many points in time where I took a demotion. So as I said, life isn't always a straight line, and in one's career, it's never a straight line. And sometimes you have to take those deliberate steps down or steps back. And I think that's when you say deliberate, I did it knowing that my career was taking a hit, but I would do it for the long term. So I always call it one step back to take 2 steps forward.
Wow.
So when I first worked in London, I did pretty well, and then moved up the career, went to Tokyo, went to Hong Kong. And my first job was in the dealing room, and it was talking to customers about derivatives, which is a complex financial product. And we went from talking to customers to talking to their voice boxes, to their voicemails, to sending messages, to then I started to wonder, do they even need me? And when it dawned on me, I'm not sure how many of them actually now are listening to my voicemails. I realized maybe this job has had its day. Maybe we are going to be replaced by a new way of working, by machines, by algo trading, whatever. So that was when I said, okay, time to give up my title, my clients, what I've built, start again. Luckily, I was still quite young. I was 28, 29. So I went from being an associate director or like a VP equivalent to being an associate again. At the right old age of 29, I was the oldest associate in the room. But it was okay. I think, in life you take those risks because you take that step back because you want to learn something new, and you think, okay, what's your downside, right? You're still young, you're still learning. As long as you're learning, there's no downside.
It must have taken so much courage and conviction, Sush, because looking back now, of course, you can connect the dots. But then, what were you feeling? What was it like? Were you fearful? Were you unsure?
I was.
What kept you pushing ahead?
Great family support. At the time, I hadn't had my kids yet, but my husband and my parents were incredibly supportive. And And actually the boss that I worked for then said, I know this is tough for you, you're giving up everything you've built just to do this job that you've never done before, but you know what, if you do well, I will give you this. If you do better, I'll give you this. So I had a career path mapped out if I hit the targets that he wanted me to hit. And I think as long as when you take that step back, you know that in the long term you're building something else, why not? And it happened to me when I first joined DBS. Piyush Gupta, my CEO, I was hired me to report to him. But after a month joining DBS, I realized I had to downgrade myself again at the ripe old age of 42. Because for the work I wanted to do to succeed, I had to create what we call a wealth continuum, which is a wealth management business, but I had to create it within the consumer bank, not on my own, setting it up, conflicting with the consumer banking head. So when I realized that, I went up to my CEO and I said, I think you have to downgrade me to not report to you, but to report to the consumer banking head. And he said, how ridiculous. I just hired you. You've gone on a group MC. Why the hell do you want to do that when you can report to me? And I said to him, because that's the only way it's going to succeed. Because if I report to the consumer banking head, who then reports to me, so I take one step back, we can create together something that's going to work for everyone. It's a win-win. He will support me, I will support him, and you know it makes sense. He said, it does. It's unorthodox, but okay. So I got downgraded. So in my first month in DBS, I also got downgraded. But this time around, I downgraded myself. So I think, and I never felt the downgrade, Rach. I never felt it because I was doing a lot more than if I had been upgraded but doing less, right? I really believe that titles don't matter. It's impact that matters, right? So if you're doing a lot in a lower grade, who cares? As long as you have impact, and ultimately you will make more impact in that role than in a sort of a higher status but less impact. What do you choose?
And what happens also when in those moments of self-doubt and you find that maybe sometimes they can get overwhelming as well. What goes through your mind, or what do you tell yourself?
So I try to figure out, okay, where is this self-doubt coming from?
Yeah.
Is it coming from a lack of confidence or a lack of knowledge? So if it's a lack of knowledge, what knowledge do I need? Are there things I can learn? So I listen to a lot of podcasts. I love listening to podcasts when I run because it's so, it just, you learn so much. You've got a great podcast, Rach. But also, like for example, when I first started my technology journey in DBS, I really didn't know anything about tech.
Yeah.
So I got all these young engineers I said, sorry to bother you. I used to do this Saturday afternoon. I'll meet them, buy them a coffee, and they'll teach me, okay. So this is what public cloud, hybrid cloud, this is what microservices, this is how APIs work, And I would learn from them. And when I went into my new job in DBS, which is to lead the corporate bank, I didn't know anything about metals and mining or renewable power or nuclear energy or how the EV battery works. It's all very technical.
Yeah.
And I knew I think the thing is, know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Then do you need to know everything? You don't need to know everything. But you need to know enough to know what questions to ask, right? So if you need to know enough to know what questions to ask, get the help to know that and what that enough is, then you know what questions to ask. And sometimes going in fresh is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Going in fresh is not a bad thing. It's like, it's a fresh outlook.
So in your journey, have you experienced, also that women sometimes, we tend to have conflicting expectations on us, in a sense where we need to be strong, but not too strong. Be confident, but not be intimidating. So how has the journey been for you where, how did you stay true to your leadership style while also commanding the room in your own way?
So I learned at a very young age the importance of communication. And by that, I don't mean using big words and sounding smart, but I mean sounding clear. You can use simple words and be very clear, and you've already won the leadership game. Why? Because people understand you, right?
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It's the clarity of communication. That's so important. Then it's a mix of agility and humility, right? What do I mean by that? Being agile means being able to kind of change the way you carry yourself depending on what the situation requires. If it's a war room, because it's a crisis, then it's a war room and you've got to be, you know, on the ball, things, you know, come up with all the data and make decisions and be quick and have deadlines and time frames. If it's a Saturday afternoon, women's leadership conference, it's less confrontational and more, you know, collegiate. If it's a negotiation, then it depends, is it a tough or a easy negotiation? And sometimes when I go into a negotiation mode, I often bring someone who's very different from me, as I said, because if you don't know the counterparty, and it could be a difficult meeting, the counterparty may not like me, but they could like the person I bring in who's very different. Or they may not like the person I bring in, then hopefully they like me. But the point is to be agile and to go in willing to pivot if you need to pivot, and move on if you need to move on. And humility, as I said, you know, the changes upon us today are so profound. And it gets faster and faster, right? I mean, after DeepSeek, first you had ChatGPT, then you have DeepSeek. The changes are so fast, then soon you have quantum computing. And it's really hard for humans now to keep up, right? But if we're humble enough and we recognize that, you know, there's a lot of things we don't know, but our job as leaders is to make sure we know enough and we have good people around your team with diverse views to make a decision and land. And you can do the execution together as a team and you can build trust within the team and you get as much information as you can. I think chances are pretty good that you will succeed. But let me not forget, in all businesses, the number one thing is focus on the customer.
Yes.
As you do, right? Yes. Focus on the customer. Focus on what the customer needs are. Focus on delivery of the best customer experience.
Yeah. For yourself, Sush, what are some ways that you also instill that discipline of always going back and focusing on the customer?
So at DBS, we do this thing called managing through journeys, which is, you know, most companies are organized vertically. We try to organize horizontally. So that means there's product manager, there's the operations person, there's a tech person, there's a legal and compliance, there's marketing, etc. We move everyone into a scrum, and that's a performance cell. Like actually, I have a bunch of colleagues here, I think they can probably form a cell, right, you guys who are here? And everyone brings their own subject matter expertise to the table, and we are guided by data. You can tell me how good you are, but if the data tells me your outcomes are not there, your outcomes are not there.
Yeah.
So you make sure you collect data that's live, and you make sure you give a feedback loop. So if you're launching a new product, you want to experiment with new product design, new product pricing, go ahead. But make sure you have the feedback loop that then tells you, did the customer like it? The customer didn't like it? What's the customer score? What's your net promoter score, etc.? So if you have this horizontal journey and you digitize everything from end to end, whether it's your workflows, your work processes, or in what we call the workbenches, so all of us have a workbench that we work off, and we've got all the necessary data we can look at, then we're all on the same page. Then we all know what we all know, and we're all united by the same customer outcomes. We all want great customer experience, we all want great customer outcomes, or we want faster turnaround time, whatever it is. So when you incentivize everyone in that cell for the common outcome and the common good, magic happens.
Yeah.
We also have what we call a RECKOON, spelled WRECKOON, so like, you know, raccoon, like the cute little animal, but spelled differently. Because, you know, like if I'm the boss and I'm what my younger colleagues say, the hippo, right? Which is, I thought was because I was gaining weight, but it's because they call it the highest paid person in the room, basically the boss, right?
Wow.
So I try not to be the hippo, but if there is a boss in the room, most likely, especially in an Asian context, everyone will be respectful towards the boss. Agreed?
Yeah. Yes.
If the boss says, I like white, no one's gonna disagree with the boss. But we have a RECKOON, So you can ask for a, hello, can I have a raccoon moment? Which means, uh-oh, here it comes. This young person, male or female, is going to come in and say they don't like something. But we make it safe because you've asked for a raccoon moment.
So it's almost like asking for the permission
To say, I'm going to wreck your idea because I don't think it's going to work, even though you're the boss. And that's the best way to get different voices, no matter how junior, to surface in your meetings.
And so the boss then in that situation also has to
take a step back.
Yes, and be very open to receiving that feedback objectively.
And sometimes it can be difficult, especially if it's your idea. But we've created these processes in our meetings to make it okay.
Before we go into Q&A that will happen soon, Su, you've always had an eye on the future. If you have always also you have surrounded yourself with different leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs, and young people, like you said. If you had to take a bet on what is that one leadership skill that is going to be non-negotiable in the next decade, what would it be?
It's attitude. It's attitude. I've told my colleagues now, because knowledge you can get, right? Deep expertise you can get. I went to see a client on Monday night with my team. There were 7 of us and 7 of them. And halfway through the dinner meeting, they dropped something which we were not ready for, and it was new news. And, quick check under the table on GPT-4 or DeepSeek or, in our case, DBS GPT, right? And the reasoning, the solutioning, you don't take everything, you take what you think is right, but the speed, right? So it's incredible how things are changing so fast. But if you have the right attitude, which means you're agile, you're flexible, you learn, you're open to learning, then you will do very well in this new millennium. I ask my daughter all the time, she's in the AI industry, I ask her okay, so how do you hack this? How do you learn about that? And being able to learn from young people is a gift. You're all so young. I think all of you in the room, the fact that you're here means you have a learning mindset and a growth mindset. That means you have a great attitude. So you're already ahead of the game. So cool, well done all of you, right? I'll give you all a clap. So use that attitude. That's your superpower. And then the other superpower you will get from technology's tools, and then you'll be unbeatable.
Wow. And thank you, Su, for always being a great example of that yourself. And you also you have been investing over the last decade in different businesses, countries, and talents as well. What would you say perhaps is the most important investment you've made in yourself?
I don't know. My family is very important. I think in life, the most important thing is family. So you invest in family. Because that keeps you grounded. You invest in your friends because that also
all the relationships.
So my best investments have been in my family, my friends, and myself. I would say sleep.
Oh, real talk.
I bet you guys didn't expect that. But invest in sleep. I have bad days when I don't sleep enough, and I don't make good decisions when your mind is not fresh. So invest in sleep, invest in learning, and if you can do 2 things at the same time, listen to a podcast and do running, do it, do what works for you.
Great advice in sleep. I think that's the number one non-negotiable that we should start protecting. Okay, Su, wow, there's a lot of questions.
Really?
I'm just going to pick out maybe just 3. Okay, I think just now, Su, you talked a little bit about clarity in communication, right? Maybe could you explain a little bit more around that? And what's one tip or advice you have for all of us today to take away when it comes to clarity in communication?
So, if you're going to give a speech or you're going to present something, so this is a fireside chat, so it's different because I'm reacting to questions. But if you're not reacting to questions and you have to present on a topic. For me, what works for me is setting the agenda and then going to the conclusion first. You summarize, you tell them your agenda and you tell them where you want to go in the next few minutes, and then your conclusion. Then you unpack your argument. Then you say, there's the positives and the negatives, but that's why we've landed. I find that quite useful, but that's me. It depends on your audience. I also believe in clarity of articulation.
Yeah.
I used to speak really quickly, and no one would understand what I'm saying. And my first boss made me listen to myself on a recorder. I was 21 years old or 22, and I was horrified. I couldn't believe how bad I sounded. So don't be shy to listen to yourself. Just use your phone and hear yourself talk and decipher, was that clear? Did they understand me? And if you're clear, half the battle's won.
Thank you, Su. Moving on to the next question, and I'm just going to combine some of them because there's quite a bit of questions when it comes to sponsorship, mentorship. So how do you find a sponsor who helps us in building our career path? And also, what's your journey like, Su Shan, finding the right mentors and mentees? And what has the impact in your life been?
So if you work for a big organization, don't be shy to get a mentor, preferably not your boss, but someone who can see and look at your own career progression objectively. And have regular meetings with that mentor, buy him or her coffee and every month or whatever. Give a progress report and let them advise you objectively. That's one. Sponsorship's different. Sponsorship is where you have people who are your champions for your career progression or your scope of work. And that's a little bit tougher. And so if you work for an organization where it's not easy to find sponsors, then I'll suggest that you have events that creates that chance for interaction. So my boss used to tell me that whenever the big CEO comes to visit Asia, and he was very junior at the time, he will make sure he takes the car to go and pick him up or her up from the airport. Because that journey from Changi to the hotel, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, that's a lot of
one-on-one interaction.
Time, right?
Wow.
So I used to do that, by the way. So whenever
Great advice.
when I work for Citibank or Morgan Stanley, when some big boss from New York comes in, I always volunteer, I'll go and be the chauffeur, the chauffeur or certainly the bag carrier, right? And that gives you airtime. So something so simple as that.
Amazing.
At networking events. By the way, I also met Rachel at a women's networking event.
Oh no, I'm like at every
this.
networking event, you see it.
Many years ago.
But that's how I have met the
We were both on
important
the same panel, and I thought, what a great young woman, founder, CEO, business leader, and I felt I had to get to know her better because I wanted to learn from you, right, as a reverse mentor. And so create those opportunities. So that's one of the reasons why I created the Financial Women's Association 24 years ago. Because I felt that some women don't have that opportunity to meet allies, sponsors, whatever. And so we could create that opportunity for them. So if you don't have it, create your own. Don't be shy.
Yeah, I think it's also like having thicker skin to just go for it. Su Shan, the second last question, what is an important mindset and habit you have to grow professionally and personally?
I'm going to share a little DBS trick about organization, and that's a scorecard. Create a scorecard so that everyone that either in your team or in your organization, your country, whatever, is aligned. You know what your deliverables are, whether it's for shareholder, for customer, for employee, how you're going to do it, who's going to do it, what you're going to do for the full year. If you can all agree that's a 2025 scorecard, that's a very powerful tool to unite the team and have clarity, set clarity from the get-go. That's so important. So I said communication. I think the importance of a scorecard so that everyone's aligned on goals, everyone knows where you want to go collectively is important. So those, I think, for me, are not negotiable. Then, as I said, creation of good teams.
Yeah.
I talked about diversity of teams. I want to talk about trust in teams. Because if a team inherently has distrust amongst the teammates, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Because if you don't assume good intent, everyone's always second guessing the other person,
Yeah.
it's just not going to work. So if there is distrust and a second guessing, deal with it. So one of the habits, or bad habits if you will, is I like to deal with these uncomfortable issues up front.
Was it something that came naturally to you, or it was a learned skill?
It's very difficult because you have to deal with people. That's the most difficult thing in the world, right? And worse still if you're dealing with distrust or difficult human-to-human dynamics. So it's just bringing people into the room and saying, okay, we have this elephant in the room. It's a distrust between the two of you. Let's just
sort it out,
right? And more often than not, if the intent is good, the distrust comes from a lack of communication or a misunderstanding of intent.
And Sush, as we close and wrap this conversation, we want to also leave the audience with one final thought. If every woman in this room walked away and did just one thing differently tomorrow, what do you hope for that thing to be?
Be agile. Be agile. So, be open to learning new skills.
Yeah.
Be not scared that the skills you have today may not be so relevant tomorrow, and so therefore you have to learn new skills. So be agile. Be agile in your attitude. Be agile in your career pathing, and learn. I always like to say this: learn, unlearn, relearn.
Yeah.
I'm in my 50s and I'm still learning. So you're all in your 20s and 30s. You got a long road ahead. Don't be scared to keep learning.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a big round of applause to Su Shan. Thank you, Su Shan.